and I might ask you some questions, or you might get on a roll telling me a story about something that happened, and I'll just let you go until we get to a break. Okay? Okay? All right, are we ready, Steve?
Yeah, right.
Yes, to turn it on. Okay, so now nice and clear so we can hear you. Okay, state your name and then how old you are. Now you can do it.
My name is Mrs Kline, and I'm 86 years old, and I lived all my life in Palmyra, except for 4 years overseas, as my husband was in the service.
Okay.
I was born on West Cherry Street, and I live now at the senior building where I went to school.
We've heard a lot about the Railroad Street building. So you went to school there. In what class, what grades were you in there?
1 through 8, and then I went to the new school next door.
Okay. Would you say you had positive experience in the Palmyra school system?
I loved it. In our days, we all walked to school,
Right.
and if you came a distance, you were allowed to bring your lunch along, because we went home at lunchtime.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yes.
So that,
And our playground was cinders from our old furnace, and then we had to run around, and many times kids came in with knees all banged up from the cinders because they fell.
where was that? Where was the playground in relationship
Right
to
in
the
the back
building?
of the school.
In back of the school.
We had some grass, but mostly we had cinders.
I didn't realize that. Thanks for sharing. That's interesting.
And we'd go down to see the janitor in the basement. He was always nice, and we went and talked to him sometimes.
Well, when you got to the high school, you didn't have a gymnasium, did you?
Yes, it was the end of the school, the middle school that's there. That was our high school, and it was built in 3 different times. And our old one is still there, and that's where they still use the auditorium.
Right, the auditorium there. And wasn't the gymnasium on the stage when you
Yes.
were? Yeah. So you didn't have a separate gymnasium. It was part of the stage of the current auditorium.
One thing I especially liked when we were little, we could walk all over Palmyra, and we wouldn't have to be afraid of anybody. And I can remember when I was only 6 and lived on Railroad Street, I could go across the street back to Stelzer's bologna factory and get a little bit of bologna, plus an end that I could chew on the way home.
Would they just give it to you, or was there a little store there? Or?
No, he would always give it, whatever you bought, you always got a little end bologna. So that I especially like
You
that.
like the bologna. What other stores do you remember from when you were growing up?
Well, let me see, Hassler's store, where now is a carpet laying place.
Slaughter's Carpet, right?
Yes.
Right.
And that's where we'd always go. I'd go to school in the morning and drop off an order, and then they would deliver, which they don't do anymore, deliver
Oh,
groceries.
no.
So they'd always deliver it for my mother.
Was that like the store in town? Because almost everybody mentions Hassler's. So was that the biggest store, grocery store in town?
Yeah, that's the only one that I remember, because we lived on Railroad and Chestnut Street, both those different streets, and that was easy to get there. And of course, Kreider's shoe store was there, and I started working there when I was in high school, and in all I had 20 years there.
Really? I remember when I went to Kreider's, there was this X-ray machine. Tell us about that.
Well, you know, at one time they said it was dangerous, and to the people that showed the shoes, so that would be the employees, and we showed it for years, and then when I came back from overseas, it was gone, because they said that it was outlawed.
It was emitting too much X-ray. But that was how you determined how big somebody's feet were, wasn't it? Was that
And if
before
the
shoe
shoes fit.
What are those measuring things called? Do they have a name?
If they do, I didn't remember, but they still use those. I see it sometimes on television when they're advertising shoes, they have it on there.
Right.
But that was a pretty easy way. And at one time, we sold so many things for the men to go hunting. I was thinking of that at hunting time. And now, they don't wear heavy boots and things anymore, or else they have outdoor stores now.
Right.
That the regular stores don't carry them anymore. But, and of course, Laux was there, and the 5 and 10 on the square, which is now the Army
The Army, is that where Lurch's was, where the Army-Navy store is? Okay.
And of course, we went to Lee's in the old Yaffe building, and which we always liked. I was trying to remember the other day when the Yaffe building was torn down, but I couldn't remember the exact date.
Well, Flip was just telling us, and I don't remember the exact date, but there was a fire there, and then after that, what did he say, was it in the 80s that they tore that down? I think it was in the 80s they tore that down, and he was talking about, they were talking about maybe moving the street, but they didn't. They decided to leave it sort of angled street.
Davy Yaffe was up the other day. He lives in Florida, and he was in my class in school.
That's what I was going to ask. I thought he was.
And he came up and he took 10 of us out for lunch,
Oh, how nice.
which was nice. And he said, remember, next year we're going to do the same thing. So I don't really know, because now we lost another member in March. So we lost 4 in the past year.
Oh my goodness. And you're part of the class of 42, right? Which was a very close class. We talked with John Rauch, who was also in your class, and it just seems like it's always been a very close class through the years.
It was. And still is the few that live in Palmyra. And of course we have someone that lives in Lebanon that usually comes. And one fellow comes from Delaware when we have our yearly lunch. But he said he doesn't think he'll be able to make it anymore.
Oh, that's sad.
I was trying to think of different things that we did. Mostly we'd go to the movie on the square, which of course was 10 cents. And I can remember we went to Gone with the Wind when I was in 9th grade. And the first thing we did was go to Lee's store and to Lurch's and buy a bag of candy, which we shared.
Didn't they sell candy at Seltzer's at the movie theater?
Well, if they did, it might have been more expensive.
Oh, okay.
And maybe it was a bar. We wanted to get small pieces so we could share it. But of course, our church was very active. I was active in the church, and one thing the church would do if it snowed, and we couldn't have school, they'd ring their bells. That's the way we could tell if we didn't have school.
Oh, really?
And my daddy used to help to clean the snow at the church. And so one day he went over there, and I said, now be sure to remind him about ringing the bell. And he came home, he said, yes, Mr. Lutz said that they're going to ring the bells because the snow's too deep for children to walk.
I never thought about that, about how, now today you hear it on the radio, but when do you think that started?
Well, now see, that would have been about in 6th grade, so that was about 36, 37 when we did that. And they might have said it on the radio, but a lot of people didn't have radio.
Didn't listen to radio then?
Well, and a lot of them didn't have it. And a lot of them didn't have telephones to call around or anything like that. We lived in the dark ages, my grandchildren tell me.
Oh, I think that you lived in, we were just talking earlier about how the fact that the past 50 years there have been a lot of changes. Well, so 60 or 70 years, there's been a lot of changes.
Especially with the building around us, you know, when you think of just one little school for all 12 grades, and now look at all the schools we have.
And we're building a new one even, another school.
I keep watching it about every week when I go to my son's place. I can see it through the houses.
This new school being built.
But you can't get too close because they have a fence around it. Eventually, when they take it down, hopefully I'll be able
I'm
to
sure
see
they'll
it.
have an open house, and all of us who are curious will get to go and see that.
The old kindergarten.
I'm not sure yet how they're going to do that, but
Well, all the kindergarten from town, and then they'll have a few grades, probably 1 through 5th.
now were you in school? I can't remember the date, but were you in school when they consolidated the one-room schoolhouses and brought those children into
No,
the Palmyra system? Was that later?
that was later. Campbelltown had their own school. And I don't know if they still I don't think they used the country schools, but Campbelltown had a school.
Campbelltown and Lawn still had schools.
Mhm.
Great. All right,
I
very
was
good.
trying to think of all the different things. Of course, we didn't have many sports in school then, but we had basketball
Mhm.
and baseball, but no football. I mean, the years that we were in school.
So where was the baseball field for the high school then? Was it back in that back corner at Locust and Walnut? Is that where it has always been, or?
Locust and Churick. That was,
Well, that's where the school was, and then
no,
where was
that's
it?
where originally the ball field was,
Oh,
and then when
really?
they built the school on there, then they had to change the baseball field.
location.
Mhm.
So it was actually, that was the location of the baseball field. Oh, I never heard that. That's good.
Well, and that was, at that time, that was the only place we had a sinkhole that I can remember. I never remembered the bowl was the
So that
time.
sinkhole that's there today has been there all this time?
Well, around it, yes.
Around that, on Cherry Street there,
Mhm.
in front of what's now the middle school, but was
And
your
I
high
see
school?
that it's gone down again, so I think it was fixed at least 3 or 4 times.
Oh.
And now there's a orange fence around again, so the same place it must have gone down.
And when you were in school, they still had that sinkhole. That's interesting.
Well, it was on the ball field then, where the ball
Okay.
field was. It wasn't where our school was.
Right, right. I wonder why they built the school there, though, if they knew there was a sinkhole there.
Yeah, but it never showed up until, what, the past year or two?
All right, I don't know, because I didn't live here until the past year or two,
No,
so.
no, it didn't.
So all that time in between, there wasn't a sinkhole,
No.
from the time they built the building,
No.
and then now all of a sudden there's a sinkhole again. Interesting. Thanks for sharing that, I didn't realize that.
But,
You were also very active in your church through the years. What kinds of things did you do for your church?
well, more children were interested because there wasn't any outside thing then, like today with television and everything like that. So we had a large youth group that met regularly, and Sunday school was always full, and our church was always full. But then they said, well, we didn't have anything else to do. Now in the afternoon, a group of us, when it was nice, we'd play softball down near the railroad. There was a place where we would play. And then maybe I'd be there for 2 hours and come home, then we'd go to evening church, which you rarely see anymore, evening church. But we had a nice attendance, a nice group, not a lot of teachers. But today it just seems you can't get them to take part.
When you look at the past 50 to 60 years, and you see a lot of things build up and now are waning, and the church attendance and participation in churches is one of those.
Yes.
And also civic clubs, like the Lions and the JCs and
The
so
women's club,
The women's, were you part of the women's
no,
club?
I never
Okay.
took part in that.
But you're right, the women's clubs, I don't know exactly when they started, I would guess the late 40s, 50s maybe.
Yes, yeah, I was out of high school, I know when it started, and they asked if you wanted to go to a meeting or two, and I said no, because I was working on those times. So I never was really interested in it, and of course now it's 2 years that it has broken up.
Right.
And they're having problem with Eastern Star ladies too.
Right, I understand that, which is really a shame, because those were the things that made community,
Mhm.
right? How would you define the community when you were growing up? Let's talk about the community when you were growing up, and then the community when your children were growing up, and then
I
community
think
today.
when I was growing up, it was knitted. I would say that you knew practically everybody. You'd walk, most of us had to walk to church. We didn't have cars. And you'd see other people walking, and you greeted them. And then when the children were growing up, they had so many extra things to do. At least mine did.
Mhm.
But and they're active in church today, but not as much as I'd like them to be.
Mhm.
It seems like sports come first, and to me that never happened.
Right, you're right. Unfortunately, our society has changed their values in terms of that.
Mhm.
Yeah. So you live on the site of your original school. What's it like? Do people talk about that a lot? People that live there, do they talk about?
Well, not as many from Palmyra live there. They live, and it doesn't mean anything to them. It means a lot to me, and we have a big case that shows the different pictures and things of our school and things. They glance at it, but it doesn't mean that much.
Oh, that's a shame.
But In fact, when I think about it, there aren't too many in the building at all that went to school there. Now, my sister's one of the originals. She graduated in '36.
Okay.
And she graduated in the old school.
Okay, that's right.
Yeah.
She went all the way through her education in that building, the old Railroad Street building. Okay.
And now the class of '37 went in there, but they were allowed to come over to our school and use our auditorium for their graduation.
Okay.
So that was the first year it was used in '37, and then.
So you saw it built. You were in school when it was being built.
Yes.
Was that exciting? Did the kids get all excited?
Yeah. Today they don't seem to mind. I said something to my grandson going around the corner when I took him home. I said, "Oh, look at the new school." He said, "Oh," he said, "Nanny, I see that every day." He said, "But I won't be able to go there, so it didn't mean anything to him."
But at your time, you knew that you'd be going to that school,
Right.
and you probably questioned what it was going to be like. And
Yeah, and it was wonderful, really, all modern to us. Now, today, when you go back to the new high school, that's what I really call modern, since they fixed that up.
It is, that's right. I remember I went to school in the old railroad building, but then I was in the class in 4th grade where we moved to Forge. So I was part of that. We saw that being built and then got to do that, so that was fun. I can understand that. Okay, let's see. What are some, you've lived in Palmyra all your life. You were born here and you grew up here. If you were selling Palmyra to people, what would you tell them that are the best things about Palmyra?
Well, when I was little, we were very church-oriented, which we aren't today. I don't think so. But
That's how the community gathered, was in churches. Okay.
And we had a community picnic at Hershey Park. And of course, a lot of us didn't have cars, so we'd go up in the trolley car. And I think the trolley car meant a lot to us. I hated to see it go. And now, of course, when I was younger, many people worked at Hershey factory, but the other group worked in the 4 shoe factories that we had in town. And I know my parents worked in one just about across the street for a while where we lived. And the people in there were happy-go-lucky. I don't know how they are in factories today, but they all knew each other and they got along fine. They had their lunches together, and of course, we were glad for Hershey during the Depression when the people were working up there. But the shoe factories worked too, but they didn't get as big a pay.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because there again, okay, they gathered at churches, they gathered at work, I believe they gathered in neighborhoods. Somebody said to me last night that you could walk down the street and people were on their front porches, and you could chit-chatting.
And when I worked at the shoe store, and I lived in Chester Street, I knew everybody. Walking home I'd stop and pet the dogs too.
Right.
And so I knew a lot of people, and they knew me too. And like I say, I could walk home in the dark, and I was never afraid. I would never do that today, even at my age. But that's the only thing that and we only had one policeman when we were little, and we didn't really need him. We didn't do anything. Maybe a few robberies, but I wouldn't, maybe one a year or something like that.
So it's always been a very safe town to you through the years, particularly through the early years.
And even now, I think it's a safe town, other than walking. It isn't the town that does it, it's people. But I think we have a good police force and the firemen. I think they're wonderful, and we do have good emergency men. They come to our building right away when something happens. Someone falls, they come and help them up. And the other day, a lady had a nosebleed, and they came and they helped her. So she said, "Oh, I'm so glad we have people like that."
We talked to one of the former fire chiefs last night, and people don't appreciate that we've had firemen, volunteer emergency, medical responders. I mean, these people have really been the backbone of Palmyra and have been there to help and provide that security and so forth. The fire police, the policemen themselves. So It's been a good place to live with those kinds of individuals here to be willing to look through all our needs, really. Great. Anything else you want to tell us? You did a great job. I appreciate it. All your memories and some of those little stories that I hope we're able to use. I like that cinder story. I didn't realize. I mean, when I went there, I don't think we had a playground. I don't remember a playground, but maybe we did.
There's grass over to the side. I can remember when the Zeppelin went by, and someone saw it. I don't know what grade, might have been second or third grade, and they yelled in the hall, and we all rushed out to watch it. That was something.
It went over the Pelmar building.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, I was just in the grades. I can remember going out the side door, and there we had grass. And then, if you go back a little bit, there was a few swings and things.
Mm-hmm.
But we walk over in back of the building, and that's where the cinders were. But we were allowed to be there.
Right.
At your own risk, because.
And then who was the nurse when you were in school? Do you remember?
No, I know Hannah Walters was, but she wasn't in school. She was. I don't really.
Somebody
remember.
mentioned they were at the nurse's office all the day, all throughout the day, and I forgot to ask them who the nurse was.
No, I can't remember who the nurse. I could probably tell you all the teachers from first grade through sixth.
Well, name some of them so other people would remember them. The names.
Well, Miss Remley was my favorite sixth grade. We had sixth grade then, and of course Miss Shirk was a wonderful, and Miss Evans too. And I can remember Miss Evans when I saw her later in life. She said the only thing she regretted was she didn't learn to drive a car.
Okay.
And we had Miss Reaver, Miss Longenecker, Miss Spitzer was the first grade teacher. Yeah, Miss Horstick, she pricked her finger on the flag, and she fainted. And Johnny Ralph was the one that ran to the principal, and we were allowed to go home the rest of the day.
Because she fainted? Oh my goodness.
So
How old were you then? What grade was
Third.
that? Third grade.
we thought we were big that we got out early that day.
I'm sure you did.
But see, then you could walk home, you know, and you didn't have to wait for transportation or anything like that.
Oh, those stories. That's great. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Janie. Thank you. I appreciate that.